service when I get back tomorrow. But David, eventually, he tried on Saul's armor. He says, I can't do it. I can't use your armor, Saul, because I've never used this. All I know is my sling. You know what? When the bear came and tried to take a sheep, I killed it. When the lion came and tried to take a sheep, I killed it. All I know is my sling and some rocks. So this is what I'm going to use it. And as he goes out, starting with verse 45, then said, well, Goliath kind of mocks him a little bit here, and begins to tell him, you know, hey, you know what, this is all, you send this little boy out to me? But then this is what David said in verse 45. Then said David to the Philistines, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. You know, and as David was sitting back there and Goliath was cursing him, David now invokes basically the name of the Lord on him. He says, you know what? I don't need all the stuff that you've got. I don't need all of these carnal, these weapons, these things of the world. I don't need these. I tell you what I do need. I need Jesus Christ. I need the Lord. So in fact, you know what? Basically, I'm telling you, no matter what you have, Goliath, whatever God you have, whatever you're putting all your trust in, you can put it. But I'm telling you, I'm putting my trust in my God right here because I know. Why? Because you know what? I'm going to go through something. I'm going to go through a hard time. I'm going to go through a trouble. But let me tell you something. I know what's going to happen because I know that my God is going to breathe in me. I know my God is going to give me the breath that I need. I know my God is going to begin to just raise me up. I know it's going to be my God is going to get me through it. Just like the same God that got Daniel through a lion's den. He didn't take him into a lion. I love to say that. He didn't take him into a lion's den. He took Daniel through a lion's den.
Yes, amen.
Because he'd have went in and he'd have stayed. But he came out of it. That means he might have went in the same door, came out the same door, but he went through it. But let me tell you, when you begin to lose your trust in God, when you begin to say, you know what, I'm no longer trusting in God, I'm going to try to trust in you. In essence, what you're doing, and I've done this over 100 times in my life, and I'm saying that I enjoy it, but basically, when you hear them talk about pull the plug, this is all we do. And then we walk out of a room and let you die. When you begin to say, you know what, I'm not trusting in God no more. In essence, you're walking in and you're saying, you know what, the very breath that gets me through each day is you're just turning that machine off. Disconnected. And then that's when you get the people who just kind of walk through just that dead shell and just kind of go and feel like they're lost in life. Feel like they don't know if they're coming or if they're going. Feel like the whole world. And you know what? Some of you might have even been in some of those times. I've been there. Grew up in the church all my life. You know, I could quote the Bible to you, frontwards, backwards, inside, and outward. You know, was always winning all the little awards and gleaners and the youth services for memorizing the most scriptures. You know, I could quote them to you. Called to preach at 16, but spent more time running from God. Running from God. Was a miserable individual because I had disconnected myself from the very breath that took me through life. Had disconnected. Wasn't God's doing. I did it on my own. I kind of just said, you know what, I don't want to do it. Hit the flip. Or flick the switch and turned it off. And now there's nothing going into that. But even though that's a bunch of rubber up there, but if you do that to a real person, that's it. Barring God intervening in a miracle, that person is going to die. Without any oxygen going through your brain, without giving you a science class, without the oxygen going through your brain and feeding all the organs you have, eventually your heart's going to stop. And as we begin ready to embark on this new year of 2010, I don't know what it is that you have wrestled with in the past, or what you're wrestling with now, or even if you are. But it's time that we begin to be like David did and say, you know what? World, giant that I'm facing, you can come at me with every circumstance that you want. You can come at me with anything that you want to kind of throw at me. But I'm telling you right now, I'm getting ready to invoke the name of Jesus.
Yes.
You know, kind of like they always say, we can invoke martial law when it seems like it goes wild, it gets a little out of hand, we invoke martial law and the military takes over. Well, you know, it's time that you've kind of let the devil kind of curse you long enough. You've let the devil kind of defy your God. You've let the devil kind of get in your ear and whisper, you know, and it ain't no sweet nothings either. You let the devil get in there and begin to whisper doubt. You let him begin to whisper fear. You let him begin to whisper, you know, just unbelief. And let him begin to take root in there. But it's time that you begin to now to invoke the name of the Lord of hosts, the name on high. And as you know, he goes on to say in verse 46, this day will the Lord deliver you into my hand. Basically, he said, already kind of said, already. He didn't say, God, I'm hoping he's going to do this. He pretty much said, this day the Lord delivered you in my hand. Mm-hmm. He spoke it into existence.
Yes.
Why? Because David knew something. David knew that where everything he got from, he knew where his strength came from. He knew where everything that he rested in. He rested in God. He knew that as a little boy when he was kind of fighting with this bear. He knew it wasn't him that did it. He knew when he was fighting this lion, it wasn't him. David knew it all through his life. David made mistakes. David wasn't perfect. I love me some David now. Because David teaches us a very valuable lesson. He always knew what to do when he messed up. He went back to God.
Yes.
He went back to God. Read Psalms 51. It was there when he realized that he messed up. Oh my goodness. Now let David come to our church today carrying Bathsheba. We're all ready to run him out. That's just the way we are. We're not about. I mean, unfortunately today in the churches we don't really like to give restoration. We like to hold on to what someone did 5, 10, 15 years ago. We don't want to give restoration. But it's not our job for restoration. That's God's job. Our God is just to love him. But David always knew. But it says he was a man after God's own heart. And every time David got into a jam, he always kind of went to God. Anytime he got into that pickle, he never went without the breath of God. Because he knew. He always knew that he could count on God. Even Apostle Paul, when he finally got a hold of God, he knew what he had. When he finally got smacked off his donkey and blinded, and God began to speak to him, and he began to kind of get all into it, and he began to realize, you know what? I've been thinking I'm doing God's work, and I've been doing it the wrong way all this time. It took God for him to get through some of the stuff he had to get through. It took God to get him through getting stoned. It took God getting him through getting beat. It took God getting him through getting shipwrecked. It took God getting him through every time he turned around, he was getting thrown in prison. That night in prison, when him and Silas were both in prison, they both could have very easily just walked over and flipped the switch and said, it's over with. I'm done. You know what, Silas? This is the end of it. Oh, we had a good run, didn't we? But it's time for us just to go ahead and flip the switch and die. I'm not saying they weren't living for God. I'm not saying you're not living for God. But some of us, we may be saying, you know what, let me just flip the switch, sit down and die. Let me just lay down and die. I'm giving up. But no, they knew where their breath came from. They knew what they had. They knew as they were sitting there, bound in stocks, hands and feet bound, beaten, stripped of their clothes, inside the inner dungeon. I can only imagine what it looked like, how dark it was in there. I remember, you know, I was in the Army and I went over to Desert Storm I went over to Iraq in the first Desert Storm. And we found this, I guess for lack of a better term, a prison. And we walked in there and kind of like, the stench was so horrible in that place from rotting dead bodies. I can only imagine what it was like for Paul and Silas back then. Sitting in there, the stench, you know, how dark it was. Probably couldn't see each other, couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Probably had rats running around, bugs crawling all over the place. You know, I'm just trying to let you know it was not a pretty sight. It was a pretty stenchy place. It was a pretty nasty place. And this is what they were faced with. When they could have very easily said, you know what? Oh, it's been a good run. I'm flipping the switch off. No more breath. and I'm just going to die. No.